Okay, parents, thank you again for joining us this afternoon. The middle school team is hosting the meeting for tonight. Every school took a rotation opportunity to host the meeting, and tonight we have with us tonight Ms. Rice, the eighth grade all grade counselor for the middle school. Mr. Olson is the eighth grade, and I think M through Z seventh grade counselor, and then we have Ms. Wilson, the assistant principal of the middle school. So glad they can host the meeting for the night. Do want to send a shout out to my boss, Miss Fisher, Miss Miller, Mr. Erickson, the high school principal. I do see Miss Vanner, the elementary school social worker, Miss Montgomery, the middle school dean of students. So I do see a lot of district support on the team. Thank you guys for supporting the team tonight. And Miss Rice, I believe it is all yours now.
Thank you. Good evening, parents. And thank you so much for joining us. I would like to introduce to you our special guest this evening. It's Ms. Yolanda Brown-Spidell. Ms. Spidell is a mother, a parent advocate, educator, and the executive director of Eaglet Educational Counseling Firm, LLC. She has served in both teacher and administrative roles in Detroit and Metro Detroit for the past 20 years, with 10 of those years in alternative school education. She completed her undergrad studies at Eastern Michigan University in psychology and holds a master's degree from National University in Human Behavior. She is a certified K through 12 administrator, a certified trauma resilience trainer, and a Michigan ACE Community Champions Presenter, MACC. Her passion is classroom management, and she specializes in facilitating professional development in the areas of SEL, and that's SEL is, I'll come back to that, parents, is social emotional learning, almost forgot, and the whole child, WSCC model, ACEs, trauma informed resilience focused schools, and diversity, equality, and inclusion. I'd like to introduce to you Miss Spandell.
Everyone, good evening. I am again super excited for you to be here. This is number 4 of 4, so we are wrapping it up. I want to say thank you to Chandler Park, all of your administration, all of the people who have worked behind the scenes while we put this together. Most importantly, parents, I want to thank you for hanging in there with us on this series. Tonight, I was sharing with the team in the green room. My allergies have caught me because anybody know Michigan, this weather has been something. It was like 50 degrees in May, and then we had some snow in April. And that's why I said, let me go back in my closet, old school, and put my turtleneck back on because this weather gets you if you let it. So tonight, I had in mind because we've covered a series of different topics over what does parenting during the pandemic look like. So I kind of just wanted to do a recap. I posted something in the chat already. Parents, tonight I want to hear from you. We have the Q&A. We have the chat feature. If there have been some questions or some things that have come up for you during this time that we've shared together, I want to invite you to put those in the chat. I have asked this amazing support team that I've had the pleasure of working with to just kind of interrupt me and throw your questions out there. But once again, I am super excited that you have, for those of you that have been able to join us for all 4 sessions, thank you so much for sacrificing your time. So, having said that, I want to go right into my PowerPoint. Again, we want to say thank you. We want to make sure that you have something to jot down notes and jot down your thoughts. But again, my expectation for us this evening is to just kind of recap some of the highlights of the presentations we've done previously. Hopefully some questions have come up or some experiences have come up with parents where you were able to actually employ some of those tools that we've spent all this time together talking about. I'm looking forward to hearing that. You know, I shared a lot of stories about some of the challenges that the pandemic has had in my house with my children and how I've had to do my own social emotional work to be a parent who kids keep coming into quarantine and kids keep coming home and kids not coming home at all. So I'm looking forward to, again, hearing your thoughts, parents, tonight. I would like to remind us that our working agreement, as always, is that we're going to be respectful in our space. We're going to take responsibility for what we put in the space, and we want everyone to know that they are safe in the space. Okay. This is here's what I know to be true. Those of you that have been with us, you know that I put this slide up. I just wanted to reiterate two things on this slide that stood out to me. I hope that you walk away with the word grace, because I share with you guys every session, grace is my word of the day, every day. And that during this time together, this is a safe space. There is no such thing as a stupid question. And I say that to people in that way because sometimes we'll sit in spaces and have a question and we're too concerned to not put the question out in the space. But I guarantee you, if you think it, somebody else is thinking it. But I want to invite you to be brave enough to actually ask it. And finally, I want to remind us, we don't know what we don't know. If I don't know, I don't know what I don't know. So I want to make sure that we are mindful that it is okay for us not to have the answers and that together we can create shared knowledge. So we started this journey back in February. I looked at this and I was like, wow, we've been hanging out for a long time, CPA families. And we talked about the challenges of parenting during a pandemic. We talked about how to frame this idea of our children needing mental health support, right? And how to frame it in a way where it's not a negative thing. We wanted to take the stigma off of it. And I was watching something the other day and they put it this way: if you broke your leg, you wouldn't hesitate to go through the emergency, to go to a doctor or to say somebody, hey, I hit my foot, I stubbed my toe, my arm is hurting. So when we talk about that mental health piece, taking that stigma off for us to be able to say, you know what, I'm sad, I'm not happy today. So let me share this story. I'm gonna put this in the space. This past weekend was Mother's Day weekend. And I'm not sure if I've shared with this team or not, but my mom has been gone for a little over 5 years now, almost 6 years. And so on Mother's Day, I was kind of hemming and hawing, and I was a little off a little bit, and I wasn't really feeling the day. And I was standing in my kitchen and I stopped and I said to myself, I'm sad. And the minute I said that I was sad, I was able to cry. And then the minute I got finished crying, I was able to go on with the rest of my day. So it was taking the time to acknowledge what I needed for my own mental well-being in the moment and giving myself permission to do that. Now that's me with tools as an adult, but we talked about what does that look like with us helping to support our children needing that same space. And then our last session in April, we talked about trauma in children. What does the challenges of the pandemic, how does that stuff manifest itself in our kids' behavior? So I wanted to just recap and remind us of an activity that we did. Parents, again, tonight, I just want to reiterate some of the tools that I'm sure you already have, but I just wanted to make sure that I put it back in the space again, for us to remind ourselves this is our takeaway from the time that we shared together. So when we first got together in February, we did this activity to talk about what COVID-19 felt like, right? And we talked about it from a perspective of fear and panic. And then we wrote down our same story, but we used strength-based language. And the reason why we did that exercise was for us to become cognizant and aware of how our words impact our physical body. So when we initially talked about it and we used words like, oh, I was scared and I was lonely and I was afraid, you felt that tension come in your body. But then when we talked about it from a strength-based perspective, and we talked about how it was good for me to do some self-care and to do some things around the house and to finish working on some projects didn't have time for, and to hang out with my kids. And we talked about how our chest opened up and we smiled. So again, wanting to remind us that the way that we talk about a thing is the way that we experience a thing, and our bodies are responding to our words, right? The other thing we shared was all the things that have been disrupted during this COVID-19. Our schedules have been disrupted. Our social interactions were disrupted. For our kids, their classroom learning had been disrupted. For many families, finances had been disrupted. And then just society as a whole had just completely been disrupted. And then we talked about some lessons are caught and some lessons are taught, right? And again, for the parents that are joining us new tonight, or for the parents that just need a refresher, being mindful that our children are sponges. They are taking all of this stuff in. They are watching us. They are going to respond to every circumstance the way that we do. So parents, it is my hope that you remember some lessons are taught, some lessons are caught. They are going to do what we do before they do what we say. Let me say that again, because that's a tweet moment for me, y'all. Our kids are going to do what we do before they do what we say. Okay. And then we talked about traumatic experiences, and we talked about how people respond to the experience of COVID, their behavioral responses. And in trauma, we know that there are three behavioral responses. Either people will fight when they feel that fear, either they flight, they want to get out of that space that's creating that nervousness and that fear, or they totally freeze up, right? And so we talked about, as a group of parents, how do we interpret our children's behaviors in a way that puts it in a fight, flight, or freeze response versus, why are you doing this? You're getting on my nerve. What is wrong with you, right? We're trying to eliminate that critical mindset. I'm going to get to that slide in a minute. We're trying to eliminate that critical mindset, and we're trying to have that curious mindset even in our parenting. So we talked about, what does framing our children's behavior look like if we say, well, my child is irritated, my child is defensive, they are in fight mode. What is being triggered in my child that's making him or her respond in that way? Or my child is actually trying to avoid this conversation, or avoid doing the homework, or avoid going to this particular space. That's flight. They want to get away from the thing that's causing them that anxiety. Or my child just freezes up. And I tell teachers that freeze is that kid that puts the hood on, pulls it down, and sits in the back of the class. I just want to disappear. I just want to become invisible. Okay. So we talked about framing that behavior that way. And so again, that iceberg, the behavior is just the top. That's the part that we see. That's the part that gets the reaction and gets the response from us, right? But as parents, we want to go deeper and we want to get underneath that iceberg and we want to go, okay, so what is happening in the mind of my child that's causing this behavior? And I will tell you all, again, confessions of your facilitator, there are days where I have the patience and the capacity to do all of this. And then there are days where I don't. And on the days that I don't, I tell my children, I have no more capacity today. So we're going to table this until I can process it. That's real parenting, right? Okay. And then the last thing we talked about in our first segment was how to be empathetic towards our own children. My kids were joking the other day, and I thought I thought it was a perfect example because it fits so well to explain one of the concepts I told you guys before, where I could think I'm the GOAT, right? The greatest mom ever. I really believe I'm the best mom ever. But if my children's experience does not agree with my interpretation of my parenting, then Houston, we have a problem. So my youngest daughter, and you all remember, I'm an alternative education math teacher. My youngest daughter was struggling in her math class. So I said to her, well, I will help you. She said, Mom, absolutely not. You are the worst tutor that I've ever had. And I said, are you kidding me? I do this for a living. What are you talking about, kid? She said, Mom, you are impatient and you're not helpful. And you make my nerves bad when you try to teach me. Okay, so you all, the lesson I learned is I am a terrible tutor for my own children because I cannot empathize when they have a lack of understanding of something that I know how to do. That was my takeaway. So I shared that with us to say empathy. Empathy is sometimes something that we have to consciously give our children. And the question is, when you look at your child, do you see a human being? Do you see a reflection of yourself? Or do you see a traumatic event that your child is trying to work through? And for our purposes, trauma isn't necessarily the extremities or the outliers of what that definition means. Sometimes trauma is a kid who has always done well in school, not acing a test. That's a traumatic experience for that child. Okay. So when you look at your children, what do you see? I see some comments in the chat. Yeah, Reginald, yeah. I sometimes I have to I gotta take it, right? Because they tell me the truth. They tell me the truth. All right. This, if you are taking pictures of things, I really want to make sure that you all capture this, because this to me is going to help you. I'm going to talk about the books at the end, but the curious mindset and the critical mindset. Parents, I share this because this was life altering for my relationships across the board. When I hear myself judging something or saying, I already know, I stop myself and go, you know what? You're making an assumption, Spidell. You are not asking the questions. Because if we approach relationships, whether that's with our children, our spouses, our parents that we're blessed to still be taking care of, our colleagues that we work with, if you come into the space thinking that you already know, then you're closed to learning. And can I offer to you, there is always additional data that you are missing in every single circumstance that you are a part of. So I want to challenge us to always attempt to approach circumstances with a curious mindset, asking the question versus a critical mindset of making the assumption, assuming we know all of the factors that are contributing to what is happening, the dynamic that we're witnessing. Ask the question. And then if we ask the question, I'm going to encourage us to be patient enough to wait for the answer. Parents, let me say that again. Because here's the thing about when we're emotional. I've shared this before. This is your brain. This is your emotional brain. And then there's your thinking brain. Your thinking brain is on top of your emotional brain. But what happens is when you are just straight emotional, your thinking brain goes away. So all of your ability to be rational, your ability to be logical, your ability to critical think, your ability to process information, all of that goes away when we are in an emotional fit. Why? Because our amygdala is saying you are in trouble, danger, danger, danger. And that's where you either hit that fight, that flight, or that freeze. That's us raw. That's who we are emotionally. As a parent, when your kid hits that nerve and you feel your thinking brain go away, hit pause. Start counting backwards to 10. I guarantee you, parents, you can feel when you're getting ready to lose it. You can feel when you're getting ready to blow. You know how I know? Because I know I can feel it when I'm getting ready to blow. I'll use another example. My son, one time, I had a toaster, beautiful toaster, stainless steel toaster. I love my toaster. My toaster had traveled from San Diego, California, all the way to Detroit, Michigan. I loved my toaster, y'all. My son at the time was 9 years old, and he decided to make a grilled cheese sandwich by taking a piece of cheese and a piece of bread and putting it in the toaster. I had a fit. Didn't I tell y'all I love my toaster, right? I knew that my thinking brain had ran away because I can't believe this boy that tore up my toaster. And I had to say to myself, okay, stop and think, because somewhere in his mind, this made sense. So I walked in the kitchen, I smell it on fire, I smell it, burn it up. My thinking brain went away because I'm about to just clock out because this boy that tore up my toaster. And I had to look at my son and say, son, I want you to stand in the corner. I'm gonna go in this corner. I'm gonna count to 10. I gotta talk to Jesus because you done tore up my toaster. And then the question is, son, where in your mind did this make sense that this was how you were supposed to make a grilled cheese sandwich? Now, parents, again, I use something that little because for me, that was a big deal, y'all. But I had to pause to go, even in that, son, how did that make sense in your mind? Where in your brain did that register that that was how you made a grilled cheese sandwich? And then his younger brother, who's the microwave king, had to explain to him the bread and the cheese could have went in the microwave, dude, and you could have had the same effect. Now you done tore up mama toaster, right? So again, parents, I share those stories to say, huh, I recognize when my thinking brain has left the building, I got to call it back because in that raw emotion, that's when we do the damage to the souls of our children. Okay. And I see you all in the chat. Thank you, parents, for not letting me feel like I was out there by myself and I'm not the only one to get good stories from their kids doing some interesting stuff. So, session number 2, we talked about what is mental health? How do I feel about mental health? I shared with you guys what my own personal journey was in judging mental health and then how I talked about it. And we did an exercise. Let me go back. We did an exercise together that said, what are the words that come to my mind when I hear the term mental health? So these were the things that I shared with you guys in our session called Confessions of Your Facilitator. And I told you all, and I'm going to repeat it again for the sake of this conversation. This was honestly how I felt because I am a woman who has made it through some very difficult things in my life. I realized that I judge people's trauma and I judge people on whether or not they have a right to feel what they feel that's impacting their lives in a negative way. You all, I'm guilty of that, right? So when I started talking about mental health, I talked about, in my mind, it would be statements like, get over it. It's not that deep. I'm not going to be that weak. I don't have time for depression. And then my infamous, Black people don't do therapy, we do Jesus, right? But then as I got into this work and understanding the importance and the significance of mental health, I now submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge that I submit to myself. When or if you hear these thoughts in your own head, how have you prepared yourself to challenge yourself to think differently about the need for mental health? Because here's the deal, culturally, if you didn't grow up in a family where mental health was talked about and applied from a strength-based perspective, then you probably do have some of these words or phrases running around in your head, right? But then as we know better, we do better. And so when I hear something negative, I then have to consciously counter how I grew up thinking about mental health versus what I know as a trauma informed trainer. Okay. So that's the question. I want to challenge us that if we have some type of negative connotation or stigma still attached to mental health, when that comes up for you, I don't want us to act like it didn't come up for us. It came up for you, you thought about it, you said it, you thought it, right? How do you challenge yourself to see it in a positive way? And again, just a reminder that mental health is an important part of our overall health for our children and our adolescents. You all, I shared this with you, and I'll say it again. I love these images that's out there on Google and Facebook and all these things. I saw this and I was like, wow, this is so powerful. What are we dumping into the minds of our children by our words? Because here's what's real. Many of us um, no longer ascribe to the physical part of what we would term as abuse, right? We recognize snatching your kid, hitting your kid, slapping your kid. We recognize those things as abusive. But do we recognize that the words that we're pouring into our children's ears and into our children's brains, it's impacting their mental health? I try to be very mindful to stop the words from coming out my mouth that I know will scar my children's souls. Because there's not a parent on the planet who consciously wants to damage their children. I believe that as parents, we all want what is best for our children. We all want our children well. We all want our children safe. We all want our children healthy. We all want our children happy. I believe at the heart level, for every parent on the planet, I believe that to be the truth. But sometimes when we are in the heat of these moments with our kids, do we have that thing in our hearts and our brains that helps us pump our brakes so that we're mindful of what we're pouring into these little brains and into these hearts? Okay. And then we talked about uh, two ways in which trauma shows up. We talked about anxiety and what it is and different ways that anxiety shows up in our children. Okay. And then we talked about depression and the sadness, because we now know that, particularly through COVID, many of our babies, our elementary school children, are actually reaching out for help because they feel depressed. So, anxiety and depression, as we talked about before, are the main um, mental health concerns that have manifested in the lives of our children, particularly during the pandemic. Remember, our children, our babies, they are people too. And then in our previous session, our April session, we talked about trauma in children. And you all, when I thought about preparing for tonight, I really wanted to make sure that I reiterated this sense of belonging, um, and how imperative it is for our children to feel connected. This sense of belonging is right. It's the glue between the basis of Maslow's hierarchies of need and the ability to reach the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That sense of knowing I am loved and that sense of knowing I belong to my family, I belong to my community. One of the things I wanted to reiterate tonight to every parent on this call, please, ma'am, please, sir, make sure that your children are clear that they are connected to you. In my house, when we say the Spidells, that means something. And although I am divorced from the person who gave them that name still means something. Why? Because that is who we are. That is what we belong to. Your identity is you're a Spidell. And I say that with so much pride. I used to, because it was 5 of them, y'all, and they all stair steppers right on top of each other. I often wouldn't have time to think about calling which child. I would just say Spidells, and they would all come running and line up and they would be present. Why? Because that is where they belong. So parents, Miss Richardson, I see, yep, team us. Because for sure, it absolutely matters that our children know they belong to this family. They belong to this school. They belong to this community. This is the place where I anchor at. That sense of belonging is so important. Team Blake, Miss Blake, I see you. Yes. Miss Stevens, I see you. That's right. We are a team us. So parents, please, that has been the thing. Um, and all of the research that we've done over COVID and understanding our children not feeling connected, it has really been depression and anxiety were really found in a lot of children who didn't feel like they had a sense of belonging. Miss Kid, thank you. Yep, team us. That's right. That's right. Okay, parents. So we also talked about defining trauma. Trauma is a threat to injury or death or physical integrity of self or others, and it causes horror, terror, or helplessness at times, right? Here's what the takeaway I want us to have for trauma. Traumatic events are subjective and they are individualistic. Let me say that again. Traumatic events are subjective. What is trauma for Yolanda may not be trauma for Miss Rice, what may not be trauma for Mr. Williams, but may be trauma for Mr. Olson, maybe trauma for Miss Wilson, but not for Miss Kidd. Trauma is subjective. It is an individual experience. And parents, I'm going to say this and I'm going to cover my eyes. I'm not going to look at us. Unfortunately, we don't get to tell our children what was traumatic for them. Parents, that has been my biggest aha moment in my parenting. I don't get to say to my child that this was not that deep because to my child, it was a traumatic experience. Huh, what an aha moment in my parenting, right? So trauma is subjective, it is individualistic. And here's the thing, if our babies don't feel safe, then they are not safe. If they don't feel like they are safe in that space, then guess what, parents? Then they're not safe. And here's what I'm going to say to us. Our children, I believe, have some kind of extra sense where they know who they want to be bothered with and who they don't want to be bothered with. And as parents, we sometimes are guilty of forcing our children to engage with people that they don't feel safe around. I want to challenge us in that. I want to challenge us to honor our children. And if our children say, I don't feel safe around Uncle so and so, I want us to honor that that child has a right to say, this individual makes me feel uncomfortable and I don't want to be bothered with them. I want us to start honoring that. Now, this is my trauma hat talking because so many times Kids know, and we don't listen to our children. And then, God forbid, something further down the line happens. But guess what? They told us that they didn't feel safe with that individual. But because we wanted to be nice and we wanted to do the family thing, or we wanted to do whatever we wanted to do, we ignored our children and taught them to shut their voices up. So, parents, I want to encourage us. That was my 30-second soapbox moment, y'all. Forgive me, because that's a personal pet peeve of mine. If y'all could tell, I got a little beside myself. But that is a personal pet peeve of mine. We got to start empowering our children to say what feels right for them and what does not feel right with them. Because if you're, and here's what I was just having this conversation with someone about my daughters. And I was saying to them, if my daughters know that they can tell me no as their mom, then I'm not worried about them telling anybody else no, because they can say it to me and still survive it, right? So, parents, again, if your children say, I don't feel safe when I am in this space, I don't feel safe when I'm around so and so and such, please let's honor that, because if they don't feel safe, then in their minds, they are not safe. There are different types of trauma: secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. Parents, we experience this when we stress out, worried about our kids. I don't know why we don't talk about the trauma of parenting, but I want y'all to know I'm working on it in a book right now, because I got adult children, and oh my goodness, they are taking my stress to a whole nother level. It is secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. When you have children and they grow up and go away, and they are not, you are not looking at them every day, that is stressful, you all, because you don't know what's happening in their world. They're away from you. Parents, I want to tell you that raising children can be a traumatic experience. Why? Because you cannot control for everything that happens in their lives. So, parents, I'm going to tell you, be good to you, take care of you, love on you, and understand that somebody should have told us when we was having these kids. And if you like me, I have five. I tell you, some days it's like, Lord, I could have stopped at one, because five. Listen, y'all can't see the gray because I put hair on top of it, but I want you to know I'm silver underneath here. I want you to know raising kids is trauma. And so I want my parents to know Yolanda is telling you, be good to you and be kind to you. We give our babies the best we can with what we have at the time. All right. Finally, we talked about different ways that you can address stress in your children: just being present, learning how to listen to their signals, focusing in on how to manage your own stress. We talked about different ways that we can talk about stress. Now, before we leave, because man, I can't believe we already at the end of this thing, Mr. Williams. But before we go, the school has asked me, Miss Spidell, what book should we put in the hands of our parents? You all, I love, 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 love the five love languages. I need y'all to know Gary Chapman ain't gave me a dime to sell these books for him, but I want you to know this book is life altering. I want to encourage you this summer, parents, if you get these books from the school, please read them. It is life changing for you. If you're married, you and your spouse, they have one. Matter of fact, wait a minute. Let me grab it off my. This is the one for the spouse. It's called The Five Love Languages. It's the purple one. The one that the school is going to give you is what's on the screen: The Five Love Languages of Children, of Teenagers. For families who have children with special needs, they have a five love languages for children with special needs. Um, it is an amazing, life altering book. And let me tell you why. Because in this book, he talks about there are five ways that we as human beings express love, right? Either it's physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, or acts of service. This book changed my life. So I have two stories to give you guys, and then I'm done. Um, my father, God rest his soul. Let me see if you guys can see the flag up there. That's my daddy flag because he was a veteran when he passed. My dad used to drive me crazy. You all, I have 5 kids, going to school, working. He was sick, but he was always asking me to do stuff for him. Can you bring me some water? Can you make my bed? Can you, I mean, just fix my plate? Now, man, you ain't handicapped. You could do this stuff yourself. Well, one day my daughter walks in the room and she says, Mom, Grandpa's love language is acts of service. It was like a light bulb went off in my head, y'all, because all of a sudden I recognized that the way that my father felt loved was when people did things that he asked them to do. Okay, story number 2. My love language is words of affirmation. So that means if I want my love tank filled up, I need you to tell me that I am an amazing human being. I told my kids on Mother's Day, don't buy me no flowers. I can't stand flowers. I love balloons, but I don't want no balloons. Go on Facebook and tell me how amazing of a mom I am and tag me on it so everybody on Facebook can see your post and put a picture on it too. Now, to some people, that may seem a little bit narcissistic because Yolanda, why you gonna read the Facebook post and then act like you gonna drop a tear when they say how wonderful you are and you told them? Well, I didn't tell them what to say, y'all. I just told them make sure you go out on Facebook and put it out there. Why? Because for me, that is my love language. So guess what? Mother's Day, all 5 of my kids filled my tank because they all, well, the few that's on Facebook, they went out and did that. Then my other one, and I have a son who's an introvert, my soccer player. He walks in the room that morning. He looked at me. He said, Mama, I love you. And I'm telling you, I love you. Now, are you good? You all, I love that. Why? Because for him, he knew words of affirmation was my love language. Look, lady, this is as good as it's going to get. So, parents, here's what I'm going to tell you. The 5 love languages will help you understand how your child needs you to communicate with them so that they feel like their love tank is filled up. So that's it, y'all. That's it. I want to conclude with as parents, we do the best we can with what we have with and what we know at the time. And again, I want to thank Chandler Park. I want to thank the parents for hanging out with us. I am positive that that book, The 5 Love Languages, y'all, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. It is going to change your life. Having said that, Mr. Williams, Ms. Rice, the team, we are back in your hands. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you, Ms. Spidell. On behalf of the school board and the school administration, uh, Ms. Fisher, my bosses want to thank you, Ms. Spidell, for this 4 phenomenal workshops you put on for the parents. I know the parents would have had a great time this past 4 months hanging out with you, learning from you, keeping it real, talking with you. So we just want to thank you for what you've done for the parents and what you've done for us. We learned at the same time right with the parents. So it's been phenomenal. We're going to have you back. We thank you for your time you spent and all the advice you're giving us. We're going to take it in and try to absorb it and try to grow from there. Parents, Ms. Spidell spoke of the book that you will receive once we get the books. The books have already been ordered. Once they come in, you will be contacted, and your book will be at your school's main office. So if you, whether you're high school, middle school, elementary, don't worry about that. We get your email address, and we can look up and see what grade your child is in. So once the books come in, I will be emailing you, let you know that you can stop by and pick up your books. Hope that you enjoy it. We may do a book study next year on it, but I'm glad we were able to get every parent who actually attended any of the workshops will receive a free book on behalf of the school to make sure that we keep this conversation going, keep it growing, and that we may be able to support one another and learn from one another and build this community of affirmation and love and positive talk. If anybody else has any questions as a parent, just throw it in the chat. Oh, Thank you, Ms. Richardson. I do want to give a shout out to Dr. Richard for joining us, the middle school principal, and I forget Miss Lewis, who was on. She was on the call. She was the first one I think who joined the call. I missed her name, but I do thank all the schools administration, support staff, and district student support service team for joining us tonight in our fourth and last meeting. And we'll see Ms. Spidell sometime next year. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you, middle school, for hosting. Good night, everybody.